Ancient civilizations across the oceans shared ideas long before we thought it was possible. A hidden global network connected distant cultures, exchanging goods and knowledge that shaped human history. This is not science fiction, but a profound historical mystery that challenges our entire understanding of the past. By the end of this journey, you will see the ancient world through an entirely new lens. We will investigate why identical plants appear on separate continents and how pyramids on opposite sides of the globe share uncanny designs. What does our collective past reveal about our shared human spirit? A massive wooden ship, its hull lashed together with rope, rides the swells of the open ocean under a blanket of stars. For too long, we pictured ancient sailors as coastal huggers, too afraid or too ill-equipped to venture beyond the sight of land. This comforting image is crumbling. The truth is far more daring. Civilizations separated by vast waters possessed not just the courage, but the brilliant technology to cross them. The Phoenicians, for example, are recorded as having sailed around the entire continent of Africa, a journey that would have taken them through unpredictable seas and along unknown coastlines. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Polynesian explorers were undertaking voyages just as breathtaking. They settled thousands of islands scattered across millions of square miles of Pacific Ocean, a feat once compared to finding a needle in a haystack while blindfolded. They did not have modern compasses or GPS. Instead, they used a profound understanding of the natural world, reading the subtle patterns of waves, the flight paths of birds, and the positions of stars to guide their outrigger canoes to new lands. This was not guesswork, it was a science passed down through generations. Expert maritime archaeologist Dr. Sean McGrail emphasized that reconstructions of ancient boats, like the Khufu ship found buried near the Great Pyramid, prove these vessels were far more seaworthy than we ever gave them credit for. They were built to withstand the relentless power of the open sea. Perhaps the most striking parallel lies in the humble reed boat. In South America, along the shores of Lake Titicaca, indigenous people built boats from bundled reeds, a design virtually identical to those used on the Nile River in ancient Egypt. Experimental archaeologists have proven that these reed vessels, seemingly fragile, are remarkably capable of long ocean voyages. So we have the ships. We have the navigators. The question is no longer if they could have made the journey, but what they carried with them when they did. What traces of their distant homes did they leave on foreign shores? A stone head with unmistakably African features stares out from the soil of pre-Columbian Mexico. This is the Tekaxic-Calixtlahuaca head, and it was found not on the surface, but deep within a sealed archaeological layer that dates long before any European contact. Its sculptural style, with its distinct beard and facial structure, is a near-perfect match for Roman artwork from the 2nd century AD. How did it get there? This is not some lonely oddity. Across the Americas, objects that defy our history books keep turning up. In Tennessee, the Bat Creek stone was unearthed from a burial mound, its strange markings later identified by some scholars as Paleo-Hebrew script. Then there is the Maine penny, a Norse coin from the 11th century, found at a Native American coastal site. It was not just dropped by a modern collector, it was excavated from a context suggesting it arrived there centuries ago. In Brazil, an inscription known as the Paraíba stone told a story of a Phoenician ship that landed on its shores, though its authenticity is hotly debated. And in New Mexico, the massive Los Lunas Decalogue stone sits on a remote mountainside, carved with what appears to be the 10 Commandments in ancient Hebrew. For each of these artifacts, the immediate reaction from the academic establishment is often one of dismissal. Skeptics raise valid concerns about forgery, misidentification, or simple accidental loss by later travelers. Yet the pattern is what demands our attention. When you have a Roman-looking head in a sealed Mexican dig, a Hebrew-inscribed stone in an American burial mound, and a Norse coin in a pre-Columbian shell midden, the sheer weight of coincidence begins to feel overwhelming. Proponents argue that we must look at the context, the patina of age on the carvings, the undisturbed soil layers that encase them. If even one of these objects is genuine, it rewrites our entire understanding of who reached the Americas and when. So we are left with a haunting possibility. What if these scattered stones and coins are the physical proof, the lost luggage of ancient explorers who arrived, interacted, and then vanished from memory? But if artifacts can be debated, what about the stories people told, the myths that were passed down for generations? Perhaps the most compelling evidence for these encounters was not carved in stone, but woven into the very fabric of legend. Stories of a world-ending flood ripple across the planet with an unnerving consistency. The ancient Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh describes a man named Utnapishtim, warned by the gods to build a great boat to survive a divine deluge. He saves his family and the seeds of all living creatures. Now listen to the biblical story of Noah. The details are nearly identical, but the echo does not stop there. On the other side of the world, the Maya Popol Vuh tells of a great flood sent by the gods to destroy a failed race of wooden people. The Aztecs had their own version, and countless Native American tribes, from the Hopi in the southwest to the Choctaw in the southeast, preserve ancestral memories of the waters rising to cover the earth. The sheer geographic spread of this specific narrative is staggering. How could cultures that supposedly never met all tell a story about a global flood, a chosen survivor, and a salvaged menagerie on a boat? Then there is the serpent. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl was a bringer of civilization, a deity of wind and wisdom who taught humanity the arts of agriculture and culture. His Mayan counterpart, Kukulkan, carries the same legendary weight. Yet look across the Pacific to ancient China, and you find dragons, serpentine beings of immense power and wisdom, often associated with water and the foundation of dynasties. Travel west to the Near East, and serpent deities appear in the myths of Egypt and Mesopotamia. The symbolism is too potent, the archetype too similar, to dismiss as mere chance. These are not just random monsters, they are complex figures tied to creation, knowledge, and the very order of the world. Anthropologist Dr. Maria Reich, who spent her life studying the Nazca lines, wondered if these common threads were fragments of a shared human past. Were they psychological patterns emerging independently from the collective human mind facing similar existential questions, or were they cargo, carried across the oceans by ancient mariners and traded along with spices and pottery? Consider the creation myth of the world egg, a cosmic embryo from which the universe hatches. This concept appears in the traditions of ancient Egypt, with the mound of creation rising from the primordial waters, and in the Polynesian stories of the cosmic egg of Rumia. The structural parallels in these myth cycles are not just about shared ideas, but about a shared narrative architecture. If these stories were travelers, what else was moving with them? This question leads us to an even more fundamental human invention, one that carries its own history in every syllable, the very words we speak. The words we speak might be the most enduring artifacts of all. Language carries the ghost of ancient journeys in its very sounds. Scattered across the world are words for the most fundamental things, like sun and water, that echo each other across impossible divides. In ancient Egypt, the word for pyramid was Mr, pronounced like Mer. This bears a striking resemblance to Maru, a word from the Dravidian languages of India that means a sacred pyramidal mountain. And then, thousands of miles away, we find the Maya word for pyramid, Mer, and the Aztec name for their own pyramidal structures, Mi-Rai. This is more than a simple coincidence of syllables. These cultures, separated by two oceans, were all building massive, four-sided stone structures that reached for the heavens, and they were using a remarkably similar sound to describe them. It is as if the very concept traveled with the design. The connections do not stop with single words. The Olmec civilization of ancient Mexico, one of the first great cultures of the Americas, left behind a script carved into stone and jade. When scholars like Dr. Clyde Winters began to analyze these symbols, they saw something uncanny. Certain Olmec signs looked almost identical to characters from the ancient Indus Valley script, a writing system from a civilization on the other side of the world in what is now Pakistan and India. The debate over this is fierce. Mainstream linguistics often explains such parallels as pure chance, or as remnants from a hypothetical proto-language spoken tens of thousands of years ago. But the alternative theory is compelling. What if these similarities are not a result of deep time, but of deep ocean voyages? What if ancient scribes carried their writing systems with them across the seas, and those symbols took root in a new world? This idea of linguistic diffusion challenges everything we thought we knew about the isolation of ancient cultures. It suggests that the exchange was not just about goods or stories, but about the very building blocks of thought and communication. The words and scripts point to a shared pool of knowledge, a common understanding of the world that was literally carved into stone and whispered across generations. If our languages bear the fingerprints of these ancient connections, then it stands to reason that our sciences and our skies would tell the same story. The stars were their map, their clock, and their scripture. High above the shifting politics of empires and the rise and fall of kings, the celestial sphere offered a constant, predictable guide. And the ancients did not just watch the sky, they built their world in its reflection. The three great pyramids at Giza are not just a random grouping, they are a perfect terrestrial map of the three stars in Orion's belt. This precise alignment was not an accident. It was a deliberate act of cosmic architecture mirroring the realm of the gods on Earth. Far across the Atlantic, the Maya were doing the very same thing. Their entire cosmology was woven around Orion, which they saw as the hearth of creation, the place where the world was fire-forged. How could two cultures, separated by an ocean, both choose the same constellation as the central pillar of their universe and then physically recreate it in stone? The parallels go far deeper than a single star pattern. The Great Avenue of the Dead running through the heart of Teotihuacan in Mexico aligns with the setting of the Pleiades star cluster. On the other side of the planet, the monolithic stones of Stonehenge in England are positioned to capture the solstice sunrises with breathtaking accuracy. And in Cambodia, the sprawling temple complex of Angkor Wat is not merely a collection of buildings. It is a scale model of the constellation Draco, a dragon of stars frozen in stone. These are not vague estimations, they are precise, mathematical alignments that would have required generations of meticulous observation. The knowledge needed to achieve this is staggering. It implies a deep understanding of a cycle known as precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that gradually shifts our view of the stars over a 26,000-year cycle. Both the Maya and the ancient Hindus calculated this grand cycle, embedding it into their long count and their yuga cycles respectively. These were not simple calendars tracking seasons, they were cosmic clocks measuring epochs. Renowned archaeoastronomer Dr. Anthony Aveney has shown that while many cultures could independently develop solar and lunar calendars, the conceptual similarity in tracking these vast multi-thousand-year cycles is far more difficult to explain. Look at the Nazca lines in Peru. From the ground, they are meaningless scratches, but from the air, they reveal giant animal figures and geometric shapes. Many researchers believe these immense geoglyphs were a form of astronomical calendar, their lines pointing to celestial events on the horizon. When you see the same complex astronomical principles encoded in monuments from the Egyptian desert to the Cambodian jungle, a profound question emerges. Was this knowledge discovered over and over again by isolated geniuses, or was it part of a shared scientific tradition that somehow crossed the oceans? If the stars provided a common language, then the tools to shape the world must have followed similar blueprints. A block of stone weighing 50 tons can be moved, but fitting it seamlessly against another block with a joint so tight you cannot slide a piece of paper through it, that is an art form lost to time. This was the genius of the Inca stonemasons. At sites like Sacsayhuaman in Peru, they constructed walls from massive, irregularly shaped stones, each one meticulously carved to interlock with its neighbors in a dizzying jigsaw puzzle, all without a drop of mortar. The result is a structure so resilient it has withstood centuries of earthquakes that have flattened modern buildings. Now, travel to the Bolivian highlands and stand before the ruins of Puma Punku. Here, the stonework is even more baffling. You will find andesite blocks cut with such geometric precision, with such perfect right angles and smooth, flat surfaces, that they look as if they were made by a machine. The technical skill required is staggering, and yet an echo of this same engineering philosophy appears on the other side of the world, in the foundations of certain Egyptian temples, where massive stones were also fitted together with impossible perfection. How could cultures separated by an ocean and millennia arrive at the same complex, counterintuitive solution for building to last forever? The mystery deepens when we listen. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, there are chambers known for their strange acoustic properties. Sounds resonate in weird ways, creating echoes and harmonics that some researchers believe were used in rituals. Half a world away, the Olmecs of ancient Mexico built their ceremonial centers with a similar understanding. At sites like La Venta, certain structures and artifacts appear to be designed to manipulate sound, to create specific auditory experiences for those inside. This was not just about building big, it was about building smart, about using physics to create an atmosphere of power and mystery. Even the wheel, that iconic symbol of technological progress, tells a paradoxical story. We have all been taught that the wheel was unknown in the Americas before Columbus, but that is not entirely true. Archaeologists have unearthed small, wheeled toys from Mesoamerican sites. The idea was clearly there, it was understood, yet it was never applied to carts or chariots. Why? Perhaps the terrain was wrong, or maybe they lacked suitable draft animals. This fact is a crucial clue. It suggests that the flow of ideas was not a simple matter of copying a finished product. It was the transfer of a concept, a seed of knowledge that would then be adapted, or sometimes ignored, based on local needs. This pattern repeats with metalworking. In both the Old World and the New, cultures discovered how to smelt copper and alloy it with tin to create bronze, a harder, more durable metal for tools and weapons. They developed systems of writing to record their history, and they mastered the land itself with elaborate terracing and irrigation canals that transformed mountainsides into fertile farms. To call all of this independent invention feels, at a certain point, like an exhausting coincidence. It demands that we believe in a universal human genius that repeatedly manifests in the same specific, complex ways. The alternative is to consider a world knit together by routes we are only beginning to trace, where a ship could carry not only spices and silks, but the blueprint for a new way of building, the secret of a metal, or the design for a better water channel. A toxicologist in a lab makes a discovery that should be impossible. Analyzing the tissue of an ancient Egyptian mummy, a priestess named Hinat Toy, they find traces of a powerful stimulant, cocaine. This plant, the coca leaf, is native only to the Andes Mountains of South America, a continent supposedly unknown to the ancient world for another 2,000 years. Yet there it was, locked inside the body of a woman from the time of the pharaohs. This was not an isolated incident. Other mummies have tested positive for nicotine, a compound from the tobacco plant, which also evolved solely in the Americas. How did these New World drugs end up inside Old World bodies? The immediate, skeptical response was to question the science. Could the samples have been contaminated in the modern era? Perhaps there were unknown Old World plants that also produced these alkaloids, yet repeated testing using more refined methods has only confirmed the original, baffling results. The evidence extends beyond the mummies themselves. Residue analysis of ancient ceramic containers from a Syrian site revealed the presence of nicotine, suggesting the substance was not just consumed but traded and stored. Meanwhile, on the other side of the exchange, archaeologists have found potential evidence of Old World plants in the Americas. The sweet potato, a crop domesticated in South America, appears to have spread across the Pacific to Polynesia long before European contact. Some linguists even point out that the Quechua word for the sweet potato, kumara, is strikingly similar to its name in many Polynesian languages. This is more than just a curious parallel. It is the ghost of a trade route, a whisper of names passed between sailors. If plants and their chemical signatures were moving, then people were moving with them. This was not a one-way street, it was a network. Think of the humble peanut. Native to the foothills of the Andes, how do we explain its apparent presence in ancient China, or consider cotton? Genetic studies show that the cotton species used in India and the species used in Peru are surprisingly closely related, suggesting an ancient transfer across the Pacific Ocean. These were not random seeds carried by birds or floating on ocean currents. These were deliberate cargo, the building blocks of economy and culture. When a society adopts a new plant, it is not a trivial event. It means someone brought it, someone explained its use, and someone integrated it into a new way of life. The presence of cocaine in an Egyptian mummy implies a supply chain that stretched across the Atlantic, a chain of trust and knowledge connecting the Nile to the Amazon. This forces us to reconsider the very nature of ancient economies. They were not isolated local systems. They were potentially global, connected by daring mariners who understood the value of what they carried. If ships were crossing the oceans with such precious and perishable goods, then they were not just carrying plants. They were carrying the very essence of their cultures, the art, the symbols, and the styles that defined their world. Carved into a stone in ancient Ireland, a spiral unwinds in an endless, hypnotic loop. The same symbol is painted on a wall in the Palace of Knossos on Crete, and it is pecked into the rock faces of the American Southwest by ancestral pueblones. This is not a simple shape like a circle or a line. The spiral is a complex, intentional design, and its persistent appearance across the globe is a quiet echo of a shared mind. It repeatedly connects to the same profound ideas: the cycle of life, death and rebirth, the flow of water, and the vast, coiling galaxy above. When the same intricate symbol carries the same meaning for cultures separated by oceans, it begins to feel less like a coincidence and more like a conversation. The lotus flower tells a similar story. In the art of ancient Egypt, the lotus is everything. It is a symbol of the sun, of creation, and of purity, rising unsullied from the murky waters. You see it in the hands of pharaohs and carved onto temple columns. Travel east to India, and the lotus holds an identical sacred space in Hindu and Buddhist iconography, a throne for the gods. Then cross the world to the jungles of Mesoamerica, and in Mayan art you find the water lily, depicted with a stunning similarity to the eastern lotus, representing the pristine waters of the underworld and the cycle of creation. The visual resemblance is uncanny. These are not just random flowers, they are central, loaded symbols in the spiritual life of these civilizations. Art historian Dr. Jane McIntosh points out that while humans everywhere might independently invent a sun symbol, the specific, stylized representation of a lotus carrying the same bundle of meanings is far more difficult to explain through chance alone. Even the most fantastical creatures seem to travel. The double-headed eagle, a powerful emblem of empire and divine authority, appears in Hittite art from Anatolia, in medieval European heraldry, and in the rich tapestry of Native American cultures of the Pacific Northwest. How does such a specific, unnatural image emerge in so many separate places? Or consider the chimera, a composite beast of lion, goat, and serpent, known from Greek mythology. We find its conceptual twins in the art of ancient China, where dragons combine features of many animals, and in the feathered serpents of the Americas, which are themselves impossible fusions of bird and reptile. The colors they used, the way they outlined their figures, the very themes they chose to immortalize in stone and paint, all whisper of a deeper connection. This artistic language was not traded in a vacuum. It moved with the people who believed in its power. The spread of these symbols implies the movement of not just goods, but of artists, of priests, of entire worldviews. If the art is this consistent, then the people who carried it must have left a more permanent record of their journeys, written not in stone, but in the very code of life itself. Our own blood holds the oldest stories. Deep within the genetic code of ancient skeletons, scientists are finding chapters of human history we never knew were written. The analysis of mitochondrial DNA passed down through mothers reveals a family tree with branches stretching across impossible distances. We know the first people to settle the Americas came from Siberia, crossing the ancient land bridge. But the DNA tells a more complex tale, one of multiple migrations and of genetic signatures that do not belong. In certain pre-Columbian South American remains, researchers have identified markers historically associated with West African populations. These genetic whispers suggest that long before the slave trade, individuals from Africa may have reached these shores and left their biological legacy. The scientific community debates these findings fiercely, questioning potential contamination or statistical anomalies, but the possibility remains tantalizing. The evidence is not just written in human genes, but in the genes of the plants people carried. The sweet potato's journey is a perfect example. This crop was domesticated in the Andes, yet it was found across Polynesia centuries before European explorers arrived. The genetic trail of the plant confirms it, and the linguistic clue seals the case. The Quechua word for sweet potato, kumara, is almost identical to the Polynesian word kumala. This is not a coincidence. This is the sound of trade, the name of a food that was so valuable it was carried across the Pacific, its name traveling with it. These biological clues, from human DNA to plant genetics, form a powerful new layer of evidence. They move the discussion from artifacts and myths into the very blueprint of life itself, suggesting that these ancient voyages were not isolated accidents, but part of a sustained interaction that shaped the biological landscape of our planet. So if people and their crops were moving across these vast oceans, How did they do it so consistently? What were the secret highways of the ancient world that made this global network possible? The ocean's currents are the planet's most powerful conveyor belts. Far from being empty voids, the great seas are crisscrossed with liquid highways, predictable rivers within the ocean that flow with a force ancient mariners could harness. The Kuroshio Current, for instance, sweeps north from the tropics past Japan, a warm, fast-moving stream that could have carried East Asian vessels directly towards the Pacific Northwest of the Americas. On the other side of the world, the Atlantic offers its own set of pathways. A ship catching the Canary Current off the coast of Africa would be swept south, then picked up by the relentless westward push of the North Equatorial Current, a direct route to the Caribbean and the shores of South America. These are not just lines on a modern chart, they are the very routes proven by daring modern experiments. The legendary Kon-Tiki expedition, a simple balsa wood raft, demonstrated that such a vessel could drift with the currents and winds from Peru all the way to the Polynesian islands. More recently, the replica Phoenician ship Phoenicia undertook a 2-year voyage, successfully circumnavigating the entire continent of Africa using only techniques and materials available to ancient sailors, proving beyond doubt the capability of these early ships. Think about the journey itself not as a frantic struggle but as a managed expedition. An ancient vessel caught in the North Equatorial Current might travel roughly 40 miles a day, making a transatlantic crossing a matter of months, not years. Survival on such a voyage was a matter of profound skill. Sailors would have stored fresh water in giant ceramic containers, supplemented their diet with fish from the sea, and perhaps even cultivated small gardens of sprouting seeds on board. These were not just passive drifters, they were active participants in a journey they knew was possible. When we overlay these navigable routes with the evidence we have already seen, the pieces of the puzzle lock into place. The current flowing from West Africa directly to Brazil provides a clear explanation for those mysterious traces of nicotine in Egyptian mummies and the potential African genetic markers in South America. The Pacific currents explain the sweet potato's journey from the Andes to Polynesia. Its name, Kumara, carried along with the tuber itself. These watery highways were the connecting threads in a global tapestry, allowing for the deliberate and repeated exchange that scattered artistic symbols, shared myths, and identical technologies across the world. The currents do not just explain how people moved, they illuminate which cultures were most likely to be in contact, creating a map of the ancient world written not in stone, but in the relentless flowing sea. 11 massive stone heads, some weighing over 20 tons, stare out from the jungles of southern Mexico, carved by the Olmec civilization, the mother culture of Mesoamerica. These colossal portraits possess features that have ignited debate for decades. With their broad noses, full lips, and sometimes even a stoic, helmeted appearance, they do not look like the later Maya or Aztec figures we are familiar with. To many observers, their visages are unmistakably reminiscent of African facial characteristics. The helmets they wear, some researchers argue, bear a striking resemblance to the protective headgear worn by Nubian warriors from the Kingdom of Kush, a contemporary African power located in what is now Sudan. This is not merely about art. Other Olmec artifacts, from small jade carvings to detailed figurines, also depict individuals with what appear to be tightly curled hair and facial features consistent with populations from West Africa. The question is unavoidable. Could these stone giants be portraits of actual people who crossed the Atlantic over 3,000 years ago? Proponents of this theory, like the renowned scholar Dr. Ivan van Sertima, built a compelling case. He pointed not only to the art but to the agricultural and linguistic clues. He argued that the sudden rise of the Olmec civilization around 1200 BC, with its sophisticated stoneworking and complex society, could have been sparked by an influx of knowledge and leadership from across the sea. The very placement of the colossal heads, often arranged in lines as if guarding a sacred space, suggests they represented powerful rulers or deified ancestors. Were these founders remembered as giants who came from afar? Mainstream archaeology offers a powerful counter-argument. Most scholars attribute the distinctive features of the Olmec heads to local artistic conventions. They point to the vast diversity of indigenous peoples in the Americas, whose physical characteristics were far more varied than our modern stereotypes allow. The analysis of skeletal remains from Olmec sites has so far shown no genetic evidence of an African population. For the academic establishment, these heads are powerful, stylized portraits of local Olmec kings, their features exaggerated to convey authority and strength, much like the idealized faces of Egyptian pharaohs. The helmets they suggest could simply be the ritual ballgame headgear unique to the region. Yet, the debate persists because it touches on a deeper mystery. If we dismiss the African Olmec connection entirely, we are left to wonder why this specific, naturalistic style appears so prominently at the very dawn of Mesoamerican civilization, only to be replaced by different artistic traditions later on. The heads stand as silent, monumental riddles. If the Olmec world was touched by Transoceanic voyages, they were not an isolated case. The Maya, who inherited so much from the Olmecs, present their own set of enigmatic clues, this time pointing not across the Atlantic, but towards the distant shores of Asia. The colossal heads of the Olmecs present a mystery pointing west across the Atlantic, but the Maya, their cultural descendants, whisper of a connection in the opposite direction. High in the jungles of Guatemala, a Maya scribe carefully carves a date into a stone monument using a complex system of dots and bars. This was not just a calendar, it was a map of time itself, built on the idea of vast, repeating cycles that stretched over millions of years. This concept of cyclical time, of worlds being created and destroyed in a grand, eternal rhythm, finds a startling mirror in the ancient Hindu texts of India. There, the concept of the yugas describes immense ages of the world, each lasting hundreds of thousands of years, cycling from golden perfection down into darkness and back again. For both the Maya and the ancient Hindus, time was not a straight line marching forward. It was a cosmic wheel forever turning. This is not a vague philosophical overlap. It is a specific and complex parallel in how two cultures, separated by the entire Pacific Ocean, conceived of the universe's deepest workings. The physical evidence is just as compelling. Look at a classic Maya step pyramid, its towering, terraced form reaching for the heavens. Now look at a temple from Angkor Wat in Cambodia or the early Buddhist stupas of India. The architectural family resemblance is uncanny. Both are massive, man-made mountains of stone, designed as symbolic portals between the earthly and the divine realms. Even the decorative elements echo one another, with serpent motifs guarding stairways and elaborate carvings covering every surface. The parallels extend to the very symbols used for writing. Some epigraphers, scholars who decipher ancient scripts, have pointed out that certain Maya glyphs bear a visual similarity to characters from the ancient Indus Valley script. A handful of symbols for concepts like star or ruler look almost interchangeable. The academic response to this is typically one of extreme caution, arguing that such similarities are likely coincidental, the result of a limited set of simple shapes available to any stone carver. Yet when you stack the calendrical concepts, the architectural designs, and the potential script similarities together, the case for pure chance becomes harder to sustain. These echoes are even woven into the legends. The Maya spoke of a great cultural hero, a wise man named Votan, who was said to have come from a land far to the east, bringing with him the foundations of law and civilization. This story resonates powerfully with the migration myths found across Southeast Asia, tales of wise travelers bringing knowledge from across the sea. Could Wotan's story be a cultural memory of such a voyage? The historical timing makes this more than just a fantasy. By the first few centuries AD, when Maya civilization was entering its golden age, Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms were flourishing in Southeast Asia, and their seafaring merchants were known to have established trade routes that stretched for thousands of miles. It is not difficult to imagine a ship blown off course or on a deliberate voyage of exploration, catching the North Pacific currents and eventually making landfall on the coast of Mesoamerica. Such an event would have been a meeting of intellectual giants, a sharing of cosmic ideas that would have enriched both worlds. This trans-Pacific possibility finds its mirror in the colder waters of the North Atlantic. While the Maya may have had contact with Asia, we have concrete proof that the Norse, the Vikings of Scandinavia, reached the shores of North America around the year 1000. The sagas tell of Leif Erikson's voyage to a place he called Vinland, and archaeological evidence at Elance Ox Meadows in Newfoundland confirms a Norse settlement was established there centuries before Columbus. The Norse presence was brief and left little lasting cultural impact on the indigenous peoples, but its existence is a crucial piece of the puzzle. It proves beyond any doubt that transoceanic voyages to the Americas were not just possible, they happened. So we are left with a world that seems to grow smaller the further back we look. From the Pacific to the Atlantic, the evidence suggests a planet crisscrossed by ancient pathways. But if these connections were so widespread, why did they not lead to a permanent globalization of the ancient world? The answer may lie not in the journeys themselves, but in the fragile nature of the societies that undertook them. The Norse settlement at Elance Ox Meadows provides our first undeniable proof. Here, on the windswept coast of Newfoundland, archaeologists uncovered the remains of Viking longhouses and a forge, carbon dated to around the year 1000. This was not a shipwreck or a lost campsite, but a small, functioning village, complete with evidence of ironworking and boat repair. The Norse sagas, epic poems passed down orally for generations, were suddenly vindicated. They told of Leif Erikson's voyage to a land he named Vinland for its wild grapes. For a long time, historians dismissed these stories as mere legend, but the discovery of Elance Ox Meadows transformed them into historical records. Yet the site itself tells an even more expansive story. Among the artifacts, researchers found butternuts and pieces of wood from trees that do not grow in Newfoundland. These materials could only have come from regions hundreds of miles to the south, around the Gulf of St. Lawrence. This means the Norse did not just land in Newfoundland, they launched expeditions deeper into the continent, exploring the rich coastlines and forests of North America. They were here and they were looking around, so why did they leave, and why did their presence fade so completely from the American landscape? The sagas hint at the answer, describing fierce and repeated conflicts with the indigenous peoples the Norse called Skraelings. These were not simple misunderstandings but full-scale battles. The Norse, though formidable warriors, were vastly outnumbered and thousands of miles from any reinforcements. Maintaining a foothold in this new world became a costly, bloody struggle. Furthermore, the settlements were simply too far from the Norse economic heartland in Greenland and Iceland. The voyage was perilous, and the rewards, while tempting, were not enough to justify the immense risk and logistical nightmare of sustaining a permanent colony across the Atlantic. The Greenland settlements themselves were fragile, and as the Little Ice Age set in, they too would eventually wither and die, severing the tenuous link to Vinland. This verified history of the Norse is a crucial key. It demonstrates that transoceanic travel was not only possible but was accomplished. it also shows us the pattern. Contact does not automatically lead to conquest or lasting cultural fusion. It can be brief, violent, and ultimately forgotten by one side. The Norse example gives us permission to take other, more controversial claims seriously. If the Vikings could cross the North Atlantic in their longships, what was stopping the Romans, with their vast merchant fleets and sophisticated naval technology, from attempting a similar journey? A Roman coin rests in the soil of a New England forest. This is not a lost souvenir from a modern collection, but a silver denarius from the reign of Emperor Augustus, found deep within a Native American settlement site dating back 2,000 years. It is one of a handful of such coins discovered across the Americas, from the Maine penny, a Norse artifact, to this even more ancient Roman money. How did currency from the heart of the Mediterranean Empire find its way to a continent it never officially recorded? The most tantalizing clues lie not on land but beneath the sea. Off the coast of Brazil, in the so-called Bay of Jars, fishermen have long reported pulling up strange, two-handled clay pots in their nets. These objects bear a striking resemblance to Roman amphorae, the ubiquitous storage jars used to transport wine, oil, and grain across their empire. Underwater explorer Dr. Robert Marks dedicated years to investigating this site, convinced a Roman shipwreck lay on the seabed. He argued that the specific design of these jars and the bay's location directly on the path of the North Equatorial Current made a Roman crossing plausible. Yet definitive proof has remained maddeningly out of reach. No ship's hull has been found, and the jars themselves, often recovered by untrained hands, lack the secure archaeological context that would silence all doubt. This is the central problem that haunts every claim of Roman contact. The evidence is often singular and out of place. Take the Tekaxitlahuaca head once more. Its discovery in a sealed archaeological layer in Mexico is compelling, but it stands alone. There is no accompanying Roman inscription, no nearby Roman tools, no cluster of Roman artifacts that would suggest a trade outpost or even a shipwreck survivor's camp. For every potential artifact, skeptics raise valid questions. Could a coin have been carried as a curiosity by a much later European colonist and lost? Could the amphorae in the bay be not Roman at all, but misidentified Portuguese jars from a later era? The line between a world-changing discovery and an elaborate hoax is notoriously thin. The methods used to authenticate these finds are therefore rigorous and multi-layered. Archaeologists examine the patina, the microscopic layer of age that forms on stone and metal, to ensure it is consistent with long burial. They analyze the soil matrix surrounding an object, looking for proof it was not recently planted. For organic materials, radiocarbon dating can provide an indisputable age. Yet, even when an object like the Roman head from Mexico tests as authentically ancient, the debate does not end. The question simply shifts from, is it real, to how did it get there? Could it have been a souvenir brought by a Norse traveler who had traded with the Romans? The lack of a clear story is what keeps mainstream history so cautious. Accepting Roman contact would force a rewrite of our entire understanding of their naval capabilities and their economic reach. While the Roman hypothesis captures the imagination, an even older seafaring culture presents a perhaps more credible case for transatlantic travel. The Phoenicians, master sailors from the Levant, are historically documented to have sailed as far as Britain for tin and possibly around the entire coast of Africa. Their vessels were certainly capable of the journey. A replica Phoenician ship, as we have seen, successfully circumnavigated Africa using only ancient techniques. If they could sail around Africa, could they not have also been caught by the same Canary current that would sweep them directly to the Americas? the evidence, while still circumstantial, is provocative. The Paraíba stone from Brazil, though its authenticity is hotly contested, contained an inscription describing a Phoenician ship landing on its shores. The very name of Brazil may hold a clue. Some linguists propose a link to the Phoenician word for iron, a metal they prized. The pieces of this puzzle are scattered and faint, but they point toward a world where the oceans were not barriers, but highways for the most daring explorers of the ancient world. The Phoenicians were the undisputed masters of the Mediterranean, their merchant ships a common sight from the ports of Lebanon to the shores of Spain. Historical records, including those from the Greeks, describe their incredible voyages, such as a 3-year expedition commissioned by an Egyptian pharaoh that successfully circumnavigated the entire continent of Africa. If they could accomplish that, is a journey across the Atlantic truly so far-fetched? The ocean currents flowing from the coast of West Africa create a natural conveyor belt directly to the northeastern bulge of Brazil, a route that would have been just as navigable 2,000 years ago as it is today. This is where the most tantalizing piece of evidence emerges: the Paraíba inscription. Reportedly discovered in Brazil in the 19th century, this stone carried a text that, when translated, told a heartbreaking story of a Phoenician ship separated from its fleet, landing on a foreign shore and pleading with the gods for a safe return home. The inscription was immediately declared a forgery by many experts, its discoverer's story too convenient, its script just a little too perfect. The stone itself was soon lost, leaving only copies of the text behind, forever shrouding it in a cloud of suspicion. Yet the debate never fully died. Some linguists argue that certain grammatical structures in the text are so obscure, so specific to ancient Phoenician, that a 19th century forger would have been unlikely to know them. The question remains, a ghost in the historical record. Beyond this lost stone, other curious parallels surface. Look at the religious symbols. The Phoenicians worshipped a celestial goddess named Astarte, often depicted with a crescent moon headdress. In Mesoamerica, the Maya revered a young moon goddess, frequently shown with a rabbit, an animal also intimately linked to lunar cycles in both cultures. This specific symbolic pairing, a goddess and a lunar rabbit, appears on both sides of the ocean. Is this a profound coincidence or a fragment of a shared symbolic language carried across the sea? The academic response to these ideas has been, understandably, one of extreme caution. Without a smoking gun, like a confirmed Phoenician shipwreck off the coast of Brazil, the mainstream view dismisses these claims as wishful thinking. The Paraíba inscription is considered a probable hoax, and the symbolic similarities are written off as the independent product of the human mind gazing at the same moon. But this skepticism exists alongside a simple, undeniable fact. The Phoenicians possessed the ships, the navigational skill, and the sheer mercantile drive to seek out new trade routes. They were not just coastal traders, they were deep-sea explorers whose known range stretched thousands of miles. To assume they never ventured into the open Atlantic is, in its own way, an assumption that limits their incredible capabilities. They represent a powerful potential link in a global network that may have also included the Polynesians, whose systematic settlement of the Pacific proves that long-distance ocean travel was not a fluke, but a repeatable achievement of the ancient world. When we place these two seafaring cultures on the same map, a new pattern begins to emerge, one that suggests our planet was far more interconnected than we ever dreamed. This raises a final, fundamental question. If goods, ideas, and people were moving, what was the ultimate engine of this prehistoric exchange? What force could have compelled such widespread and lasting contact across the globe? Their double-hulled voyaging canoes were catamarans of incredible sophistication. capable of carrying families, livestock, and entire ecosystems across thousands of miles of open ocean. The Polynesians did not just stumble upon islands, they launched planned colonization missions, navigating by a living map written in the world around them. They memorized the precise rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, creating a celestial compass. They felt the subtle swells of the ocean, reading the way waves reflected off distant, unseen land masses. They watched the flight patterns of seabirds at dusk, knowing which species would fly toward land to roost. This was wayfinding, a science of observation passed down through chance and apprenticeships, and it allowed them to pinpoint specks of land in an ocean covering nearly a third of our planet. Their expansion was a deliberate, breathtaking explosion across the Pacific. Starting from island Southeast Asia around 3,000 years ago, they reached Samoa and Tonga. By 500 AD, they had settled the Society Islands. Then, in a final, incredible surge, they found Hawaii to the north, Rapa Nui or Easter Island to the east, and Aotearoa, New Zealand to the southwest, all within a few centuries. This was the final, triumphant phase of humanity's settlement of the planet. But the story does not end with the Polynesians finding empty islands. The evidence suggests they found something else, a continent. The sweet potato is the star witness in this case. This root crop was unquestionably domesticated in the Andes Mountains of South America. Yet, it was a staple food across Polynesia when European explorers first arrived. The word for it in many Polynesian languages is kumara, a term strikingly similar to its name in Quechua, the language of the Andean Inca, kumara. This is not just a linguistic clue, it is a receipt. It proves the sweet potato was not carried by birds or floating on currents. It was deliberately traded, and its name was traded with it. The evidence became undeniable with archaeology. At a site called El Arenal on the coast of Chile, researchers uncovered chicken bones dating to around 1300 AD. Genetic analysis confirmed these were Polynesian chickens, arriving in South America a century before the Spanish. So we have an American plant in Polynesia and a Polynesian animal in America. This was not a one-way shipwreck, this was contact and exchange. Imagine the scene, a massive Polynesian voyaging canoe, its sails woven from pandanus leaves pulling up on a Chilean beach. The meeting between these Polynesian explorers and the local indigenous people must have been a moment of awe and curiosity. They traded, they shared knowledge, and then the Polynesians sailed home, carrying the sweet potato, a crop that would become a cornerstone of their survival. This confirmed contact shatters the last remnants of the isolated world theory. It proves that the Pacific Ocean was not a barrier but a bridge, and that the Polynesians were the master architects of that bridge. Their sustained, two-way voyages demonstrate that long-distance ocean travel was not just a desperate gamble, but a repeatable, manageable feat. If the Polynesians could maintain a cultural network across 10,000 miles of ocean, why couldn't others have done the same across the Atlantic or the Indian Ocean? Their success forces us to look at every other piece of anomalous evidence with new eyes, not as isolated curiosities, but as potential waypoints on a global map we are only beginning to decode. Human societies often walk similar paths even when separated by continents. This is the core argument of the independent invention theory, a cornerstone of mainstream archaeology. It proposes that when different cultures face the same basic human needs and environmental challenges, they are likely to arrive at similar solutions entirely on their own. The pyramid is a perfect example. If your goal is to build a tall, imposing structure that will not collapse, piling stones in a gradually receding shape is one of the most stable and logical designs possible. It is simple physics. This is why we see pyramids not just in Egypt and Mesoamerica, but in Mesopotamia, in ancient Greece, and in other parts of the world. They are not necessarily copies of a single blueprint, but separate answers to the same architectural problem. This principle extends beyond buildings and into the human mind itself. Scholars point to psychological universals, the innate fears and fascinations shared by all people. A fear of snakes, for instance, is a practical survival instinct that could independently lead to snakes being cast as villains in myths from India to Ireland. Similarly, the sun is the ultimate source of life, warmth, and light. Is it any wonder that dozens of cultures, from the Inca to the Egyptians, would independently deify it? The influential archaeologist Dr. Gordon Childer argued that human societies evolve along predictable trajectories. The discovery of agriculture, the development of cities, the invention of metallurgy, these are not random events. They are logical stages of societal development that can, and did, occur independently in multiple cradles of civilization. Look at the historical record. Agriculture was born separately in the Fertile Crescent, in China, in Mesoamerica, and in the Andes. Writing was invented in Mesopotamia, in China, and in Mesoamerica, with no evidence that one system taught the others. The smelting of copper and the creation of bronze happened in the Old World and later in the New World, with no contact between the metalworkers. From this perspective, the parallels we see are not mysterious, they are inevitable. They are the natural result of human ingenuity solving universal problems. This is a powerful and rational argument that provides a balanced view of human history. Yet, for all its strength, this theory struggles to account for the sheer specificity of some connections. Why would cultures use nearly identical words for pyramid? Why would the same complex mythological narrative, like the world flood with a boat and saved animals, appear with such detail in disconnected parts of the globe? While independent invention explains the broad strokes of human progress, it leaves a trail of tantalizing anomalies whispering of a more interconnected ancient world. There is another side to this great debate, a perspective that finds the sheer volume of coincidences too overwhelming to ignore. This is the diffusionist viewpoint, which argues that many of these uncanny parallels are not independent at all, but the direct result of contact between cultures. For diffusionists, a shared word for pyramid or an identical flood myth is not a product of universal psychology, but a relic of a shared journey, a story carried across the water and left on a foreign shore. They focus on the specific and the complex, asking why a particular type of loom, or a unique method of bronze casting, or the exact same astronomical alignment appears in two distant lands at roughly the same time. The legendary explorer Thor Heyerdahl became the movement's most famous modern champion, not with a dusty book but with a daring adventure. He constructed the Kon-Tiki, a simple balsa wood raft, and proved it could drift from Peru to Polynesia using only the natural currents. Later, with the papyrus boat Ra, he demonstrated that ancient Egyptian-style vessels could have crossed the Atlantic. His voyages were not meant to prove that these journeys definitely happened, but to shatter the prevailing assumption that they were impossible. The history of this idea stretches back to scholars like Grafton Elliott Smith, who controversially proposed that all civilization diffused from a single source, ancient Egypt. While his hyper-diffusionist ideas were rightly criticized for being overly simplistic and dismissive of non-European ingenuity, they sparked a crucial conversation. Modern proponents are far more nuanced. They do not see a single point of origin, but a web of interactions. They point to cases where contact seems not just likely, but almost certain. The sweet potato's journey from the Andes to Polynesia, complete with its name, is a classic example. The presence of Polynesian chicken bones in pre-Columbian Chile is another. These are not vague artistic styles, they are tangible, biological facts that demand an explanation involving human movement. The debate between the independent Invention school and the diffusionist school is the central fault line running through this entire mystery. One side sees human history as a series of brilliant but separate experiments, while the other sees a planet already humming with exchange. This is not merely an academic quarrel, it is a fundamental disagreement about the nature of our past. Were we a species of isolated geniuses, or were we a global network from the very beginning? To find an answer that moves beyond theory and speculation, we must turn to the tools of our own time, to the cutting-edge technologies that are finally allowing us to read the faintest traces left behind. A laser pulse fired from an aircraft cuts through the dense canopy of a Guatemalan jungle, and what was once an impenetrable green blank, it reveals the ghost of a city. This is LiDAR, a technology that is stripping away the veil of time to show us an ancient world far more vast and interconnected than we ever suspected. Where we once saw small, isolated Maya city-states, we now see sprawling metropolitan networks with raised highways, extensive irrigation canals, and countless structures hidden for centuries. These were not isolated villages, they were complex societies with the infrastructure and the economic might to support long-distance exchange. The very scale of these discoveries forces us to reconsider their reach. A society capable of building 100 square miles of managed landscape was certainly capable of sending or receiving trading expeditions across the sea. But LiDAR only shows us the stage, it does not show us the actors. To find the people, we must look deeper into the very chemistry of their bones and belongings. Scientists can now analyze the strontium isotopes locked within an ancient tooth. These isotopes act as a geological fingerprint, absorbed from the local food and water during childhood, permanently marking where a person was born. When archaeologists tested the remains of individuals buried at major Olmec sites like San Lorenzo, they made a startling discovery: some of these people were not local. Their isotopic signatures pointed to distant highland regions, proving that these great centers were melting pots, drawing people from far and wide. This is no longer speculation, it is data etched into human enamel. The same scientific principles can be applied to objects. The origins of a jade axe or an obsidian blade can be pinpointed by analyzing its unique chemical composition, tracing it back to the specific quarry or volcano from which it came. We now have hard evidence of goods traveling hundreds, even thousands of miles in the ancient world. These are the first tangible threads of that global network, no longer based on a resemblance in art, but on the immutable laws of physics and chemistry. Perhaps the most powerful tool in this new arsenal is ancient DNA sequencing. By extracting genetic material from skeletal remains, researchers can now read the direct biological history of human migration. This technology has already confirmed the Polynesian presence in South America through those chicken bones, and it is now being applied to human remains across the Americas, searching for genetic markers that hint at even earlier, more surprising voyages. Each new scan, each isotopic test, each sequenced genome is another data point on a map we are only beginning to draw. We are moving from a world of mystery to a world of evidence, where the stories of long-distance contact can finally be tested with the rigor of a crime scene investigation. The question is no longer if we can prove these connections existed, but how wide this web truly spread. The faint whispers of ancient contact now coalesce into a tangible map of the world. We can trace potential routes across the oceans, not as random wanderings, but as established pathways in a vast prehistoric network. Picture three great highways of the ancient seas. The first, a Pacific route, swept voyagers from the islands of Southeast Asia through the Polynesian crossroads and onward to the coasts of South and Central America. This was the superhighway of the sweet potato and the Polynesian chicken, a two-way street of sustained exchange. Then, imagine an Atlantic route, a conveyor belt of currents flowing from the western coast of Africa, carrying Phoenician or other mariners directly to the bulging shores of Brazil and the Caribbean. This path offers a clear explanation for those mysterious African echoes in Olmec art and the baffling presence of New World plants in Old World mummies. A third, more speculative route might have crossed the southern Indian Ocean, linking the sophisticated cultures of the Indus Valley and India with the early kingdoms of Southeast Asia and perhaps beyond. At the intersections of these routes sat powerful hubs, bustling centers of trade and innovation. Think of the Indus Valley city of Mohenjo-Daro, a metropolis with planned streets and advanced drainage, potentially trading goods and ideas with Mesopotamia. From there, connections would have stretched to Egypt, another colossal hub on the Mediterranean. Across the Atlantic, the Olmec heartland in Mexico and the early Andean civilizations in South America would have served as the New World terminals, receiving new ideas and sending their own unique products back across the sea. At each of these nodes, a cultural alchemy would have taken place. A Mesopotamian merchant might have traded a bead for an Olmec jade figurine, while an Egyptian sailor could have shared a story about the stars with a local shaman. These were not just economic transactions, they were the moments when technologies were exchanged, when the blueprint for a pyramid might have been sketched in the sand, or when the secret of bronze alloying was demonstrated. This network's very structure explains the global distribution of so many puzzling traits. It was not that every culture independently decided to build a stepped pyramid, but that the concept itself was a piece of intellectual cargo, moving from hub to hub along these maritime routes, adapted and refined by each new society it touched. The world of our ancestors was not a collection of isolated lanterns, but a glittering, interconnected web, its lights flickering in a constant, silent conversation across the deep. The climate itself was an engine for exploration. Great shifts in global weather did not just change the landscape, they opened and closed doors for humanity. During the last glacial period, so much of the world's water was locked in ice that sea levels plummeted, exposing vast continental shelves. The Bering Land Bridge is the famous example, a 1,000-mile-wide grassland that served as a highway for the first people entering the Americas. But this was just one of the new pathways. All around the world, coastlines extended far beyond their current boundaries, creating lush, habitable plains that are now deep underwater. These lost coastal shelves would have been perfect routes for early mariners, allowing them to island hop and voyage along fertile, now vanished shores without ever having to brave the terrifying emptiness of the open ocean. When the world warmed again and the seas rose, these routes vanished beneath the waves, taking the evidence of these early journeys with them. Conversely, warm eras acted as a green light for seafarers. The Roman warm period, a centuries-long stretch of unusually mild and stable climate across the North Atlantic, coincided with the peak of Roman power. Calmer seas, more predictable winds, and the retreat of Arctic ice would have made northern voyages, perhaps even to the Americas, far less perilous. We can read this ancient weather report in the most unlikely of places, locked deep within the ice of Greenland and the sediments of ocean floors. Scientists drill down and extract ice cores, long cylinders of ancient ice that contain tiny bubbles of the Earth's past atmosphere. By analyzing these, they can chart temperature and greenhouse gas levels year by year, going back thousands of years. Similarly, layers of sediment on the seafloor preserve a history of ocean temperatures and storm activity. When we line up this precise climate data with the proposed dates for transoceanic contact, the correlations are startling. The daring voyages of the Polynesians, for instance, exploded during a period of favorable Pacific climate. The evidence suggests that the environment was not a static backdrop, but an active participant, its rhythms either inviting exploration or slamming the door shut. On the ground, geography directed the flow of this human traffic. The narrow isthmus of Panama acted as a crucial filter, a place where goods and ideas from the Atlantic and Pacific could be exchanged across a mere 50 miles of land, avoiding a months-long journey around the continent. Meanwhile, the Sahara Desert was not always a barrier. In its greener phases, it was a conduit, with river networks and savannas allowing the movement of people and cultures between Central Africa and the Mediterranean coast. Mountains, rivers, and ocean currents formed a planetary circuit board, channeling humanity's movements and connections in predictable ways. Understanding these environmental factors is not just about adding context, it is about proving feasibility. It shows that the ancient world had its seasons for connection, windows of opportunity when the planet itself conspired to bring its children together. A hidden global network would have acted as an invisible engine for civilization itself. The sudden, parallel rise of complex societies across the world might not be a series of lucky accidents, but the direct result of shared knowledge traveling along ancient sea routes. Think of a revolutionary idea like the concept of pyramid building or the secret of bronze metallurgy arriving on a foreign shore. It would not just be a new building or a new tool, it would be a catalyst accelerating a culture's development by centuries. A local chief seeing the blueprint for a monumental structure could consolidate power in ways never before possible. An artisan learning a new metal alloy could create weapons and tools that transformed agriculture and warfare. This was not about one culture dominating another, but about a global pool of innovation that everyone could draw from, speeding up the very pace of human progress. The most profound impact would have been on the dinner table. The exchange of staple crops could have redefined entire continents. Imagine a ship carrying maize, a new world supercrop across the Pacific to Asia. Its introduction could have sparked a population boom, fueling the growth of empires. Conversely, the arrival of Old World bananas or sugarcane in the Americas could have created new agricultural economies and transformed local diets. We see this model clearly in the later Silk Road, where the movement of grapes, citrus, and almonds reshaped cultures from Rome to China. In this ancient network, cotton provides a perfect example. The transfer of cotton species and weaving technology between India and Peru suggests a shared textile revolution that clothed people on opposite sides of the planet. This was not just trade, it was the deliberate sharing of the very foundations of life. Yet, this interconnected world would have had a dark side. With every ship carrying precious goods and new ideas, it could also carry invisible stowaways, pathogens for which distant populations had no immunity. While the catastrophic disease exchanges of the Columbian era are well known, an earlier, more limited contact might have seeded similar, if smaller, tragedies. A virus or bacterium arriving with a group of traders could have swept through a vulnerable population, causing societal disruption long before any written record could document it. Conflict, too, might have traveled along these routes. The introduction of superior metal weapons or new military strategies from one hemisphere to another could have shifted the balance of power, leading to the rise of new empires and the fall of old ones. The benefits of shared technology were immense, but they came with the inherent risk of destabilizing the very societies they were meant to help. This dual-edged nature forces us to see our collective past not as a series of isolated triumphs, but as a continuous global conversation. The rise and fall of civilizations may be deeply intertwined, their fates linked by currents we are only now beginning to understand. If these connections were so profound, why did they fade from our collective memory? What could have caused such a vast and influential network to vanish from history, leaving only these cryptic clues behind? A field so ripe with mystery is also fertile ground for forgery. The Kensington runestone, discovered in Minnesota by a Swedish farmer in the late 19th century, seemed to be the ultimate proof of a Norse expedition deep into the North American heartland. Its runic text told a dramatic story of Vikings trapped and attacked far from the sea. For decades, it fueled the imagination and was held up as undeniable evidence. Yet, modern linguistic analysis revealed its language was an impossible mix, containing grammatical forms and words that did not exist in 14th century Old Norse, but which perfectly reflected the Swedish of the 19th century immigrant community. It was a well-crafted hoax, likely born from a desire to carve a proud Scandinavian identity into the very bedrock of the New World. Then there are the crystal skulls, hauntingly beautiful artifacts once claimed to be ancient Mesoamerican masterpieces possessing mystical powers. They were said to be so perfectly carved that no modern tool could replicate them. Scientific examination told a different story. Microscopic analysis revealed the telltale marks of high-speed, modern rotary tools, impossible before the Industrial Revolution. These were not relics of a lost civilization, but exquisite fakes, probably manufactured in Germany in the 19th century to feed a growing European obsession with the occult and the exotic. The motives behind these deceptions are as varied as the fakes themselves. Sometimes it is simple greed, the lure of a high price from an eager collector. Other times it is nationalism, a desire to prove one's ancestors were the first, the bravest, the most advanced, and occasionally it is a more personal longing for fame or to simply be part of a grand story. The damage these hoaxes cause is profound. They provide easy ammunition for skeptics to dismiss the entire field as the playground of cranks and dreamers. They force serious researchers to waste precious time and resources debunking obvious fakes, and they create a thick smokescreen that obscures the more subtle, more ambiguous, and potentially genuine evidence. This constant battle between open-minded inquiry and rigorous skepticism is the very heart of the scientific process. It is not enough to simply believe, one must verify. Every claim, every artifact must be subjected to the most unforgiving scrutiny. Patina, the layer of age on stone, can be faked. Soil stratigraphy can be misinterpreted. Radiocarbon dates can be contaminated. The only defense is a multi-pronged approach, combining archaeology, linguistics, chemistry, and genetics to build a case so strong it can withstand any doubt. This critical, demanding approach is what separates fantasy from history. It ensures that as we move forward, we are building our understanding on a foundation of stone, not sand. And with that solid foundation now in place, a new generation of explorers is rising, armed with tools that can finally read the faintest whispers of the past. The ocean floor holds our greatest untold stories. While we have mapped the surface of Mars in greater detail than our own seabeds, a new wave of underwater archaeology is now targeting submerged coastlines, the very landscapes ancient mariners would have known. Advanced sonar and submersible drones are scanning the continental shelves, searching for the drowned outlines of ports, settlements, and most tantalizingly, the skeletal remains of shipwrecks far older than any previously found. A single ancient hull preserved in the cold, dark depths could be the smoking gun that confirms a transoceanic voyage, its cargo hold still filled with the artifacts of two worlds. This search is no longer a solitary pursuit. It is a symphony of disciplines where geneticists work alongside climatologists and linguists compare data with master mariners who sail replica ships. International projects are now creating digital supermodels of the ancient world, feeding in climate data, current patterns, and archaeological finds to simulate thousands of years of potential human movement. These are not just academic exercises, they are predictive tools pointing researchers to the most likely spots for a major discovery. One such initiative is targeting the underwater plateau known as the Bimini Road, investigating whether its seemingly fitted stones are a natural formation or the ruins of a lost harbor. Another expedition is preparing to scour the seabed off the coast of Gujarat in India, a region historically linked to the seafaring Indus Valley civilization, searching for evidence of their ocean-going vessels. The future of this field lies in its ability to test specific hypotheses with hard science. Imagine a team extracting a core sample from deep beneath the ice of Greenland and finding a layer of ash from a volcanic eruption that only occurred in the Americas, carried across the Atlantic by winds and deposited at a precise moment in time. Or consider the ongoing genetic sequencing of ancient skeletal remains from coastal sites in both South America and Japan, looking for a shared marker that would confirm a prehistoric link. Every new technology acts as a key for a lock we did not even know existed. The story of our past is not a closed book sitting on a shelf. It is a living document, its pages still being written with every core sample drilled, every genome sequenced, and every sonar ping that echoes back from the abyss. What we believe today may be only a fraction of the truth waiting to be unearthed from the deep. Our history books have long presented a world of isolated genius, where civilizations rose in splendid solitude. This narrative of separation is comforting in its simplicity, but the evidence we have explored paints a far more dynamic portrait of our past. If we accept the possibility of this hidden global network, we are forced to let go of the idea that cultures developed entirely on their own. Instead, we see a planet humming with exchange, where a breakthrough in metallurgy in one hemisphere could, in time, inspire an artisan in another. Human innovation was not a series of isolated sparks, but a chain reaction, fueled by the constant flow of ideas across oceans. This perspective fundamentally reshapes our understanding of cultural development. It was not about one culture being inherently superior and inventing everything, but about a shared pool of knowledge that everyone could contribute to and draw from. The pyramid is not an Egyptian idea or a Mesoamerican idea, but a human idea, refined and reimagined as it traveled. This interconnectedness also redefines our view of migration. It was not merely a one-time trek across a land bridge, but a continuous process of exploration and return, of establishing contact and maintaining links across unimaginable distances. The Polynesians did not just settle islands, they created a living network that sustained contact across thousands of miles of open ocean for generations. Recognizing these connections does not diminish the achievements of ancient peoples, it enriches them. Their capabilities were even more profound than we thought. They were not just brilliant architects and astronomers, they were intrepid global citizens, navigating both the seas and the complex challenges of cultural exchange. This realization fosters a powerful sense of shared human heritage. It breaks down ethnocentric views that claim certain advancements for one part of the world alone. Our collective story becomes one of collaboration and mutual influence, long before the term globalization was ever coined. We begin to see our ancestors not as rivals in a race to civilization, but as partners in a grand planet-spanning project of discovery. This broader, more connected view of our past does more than just rewrite history. It offers a profound lesson for our future, revealing a blueprint for cooperation that we have forgotten. That ancient web of ocean pathways reveals a fundamental truth about humanity. Our drive to explore, to trade, and to share knowledge is not a modern invention. It is a deeply rooted force that has shaped our species since the first canoe pushed beyond the horizon. This prehistoric globalization was not just about moving goods, it was about moving minds. When a new idea landed on a foreign shore, it could ignite a cultural renaissance, accelerating technology and enriching art in ways that isolation never could. The shared blueprint for the pyramid, the exchanged secret of bronze, the traveling myth of the flood, these were the building blocks of a shared civilization, a testament to the incredible progress that blooms from connection. Yet this ancient network also carries a sobering warning. Every ship arriving with new seeds and new stories also carried the potential for unseen disruption. The introduction of a foreign technology could destabilize a local economy, a new weapon could shift the balance of power, and invisible pathogens could travel silently in the hold, bringing tragedy to populations with no immunity. Contact was never a simple gift, it was a complex exchange with profound consequences, both glorious and grim. We are living through a modern echo of this ancient process. Our digital networks and global supply chains are the new ocean currents, connecting us at a speed and scale our ancestors could never have dreamed of. The lessons from their world are strikingly relevant for our own. How do we foster the beneficial flow of ideas and innovation that can solve our shared global challenges while still protecting the unique cultural integrity of communities? How do we ensure that our modern exchanges enrich rather than erase? The past shows us that the most resilient societies were likely those that could adapt and integrate new ideas without losing their own soul. Our journey through these mysteries has painted a new picture of the ancient world. We have seen that the oceans were not barriers but bridges, navigated by brilliant mariners whose capabilities we are only beginning to appreciate. We have traced the evidence in shared plants and drugs, in parallel myths and symbols, and in the uncanny alignment of stones with the stars. We have moved from the colossal heads of the Olmecs to the wayfinding canoes of the Polynesians, from the potential Roman coin in the Americas to the confirmed Polynesian chicken in Chile. The cumulative weight of this evidence suggests a planet that was interconnected long before our history books said it was possible. This is not a story of one superior culture civilizing the world, but of a vibrant, multidirectional exchange, a global conversation that shaped the destiny of us all. The greatest lesson this hidden network offers may be one of hope. It reminds us that our shared human heritage is one of curiosity, courage, and a relentless desire to reach out and connect. In an age of modern divisions, this ancient legacy of connection is a powerful reminder of what we can achieve together. We have sailed across oceans and journeyed through millennia, tracing the faint outlines of a world far more connected than our textbooks ever described. The evidence we have explored, from the seaworthy ships of the Phoenicians to the wayfinding genius of the Polynesians, builds a compelling case. We have seen shared plants in impossible places, myths that echo across continents, and artistic symbols that carry the same profound meanings. The debate between independent invention and cultural diffusion is not a mere academic quarrel. It is a fundamental conversation about the nature of human ingenuity and our innate desire to explore. While we may never have all the answers, the scales are tipping. New tools, from genetic sequencing to underwater LiDAR, are giving us the power to test these ancient mysteries with scientific rigor, steadily adding pieces to a puzzle we are only beginning to assemble. This journey reminds us that history is not a closed book written in stone. It is a living story, constantly rewritten with each new discovery. Our ancestors were not primitive people huddled in isolated corners of the globe. They were intrepid explorers, brilliant astronomers, and master engineers whose horizons stretched across the vast, open sea. They possessed a courage and a curiosity that we are only now relearning to appreciate. The past is not a foreign country. It is a world of profound connections, a hidden network of human spirit that challenges us to see our shared heritage in a new light. What do you think? Could the ancient world have been this connected? Share your thoughts on these enduring mysteries in the comments below. And if you are ready for more journeys into the unknown, subscribe to continue exploring the greatest secrets of our